Today I'm going to be sharing some of my very favorite watercolor techniques. They're super fun and easy to do, and all you need is your watercolors and a couple of things that you probably already have in your home and studio. So if you want to follow along, just grab a little bit of table salt from your kitchen, some alcohol from the bathroom, and if you have just a couple of oil pastels, that's all you'll need, in addition to your watercolors and some paper and a round brush, maybe a 6 or an 8. Don't worry if you don't have the exact size. This is just going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to do some experimentation. So the first thing I want to talk about is before we get started is I'm going to be working on these Strathmore watercolor postcards, which I just really love and I use all the time because I take them on trips and they're super cute little postcards. So what I like to do is, I will, make a little painting on them and then I will send them. Sometimes I'll make like a little, like a painting of something I've seen on my trips and things like that. But I also like using them just for playing around, making abstracts, and then you can just pop them in the mail with a postcard stamp. So these are super cute, and I just thought it would be fun to practice the different techniques on these rather than just a piece of paper, because sometimes it's just more fun using something just a little bit more intentional rather than just practicing in a sketchbook or on a pad. So this very first one is probably one of the easier ones, and it's the wet on dry. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to just use wet paint on dry paper, and it's a way to get a crisp edge with your paint. So I'm going to just create a little abstract design. I'm getting some movement going here by creating a curvy line, and I'm just dipping in and out of all my analogous blue colors. So I'm using color neighbors, all just colors that go really well together, and I'm dipping in and out of all those different warm and cool blues, and they all go together nicely, and it's just a fun way to make a little design, abstract design. And so that's the first technique, and that is wet over dry. And yeah, it came out really cute, and I'm going to set that one aside and let it dry, and we will move on to the next one. So this next one we're going to do is going to be wet on wet. So I'm taking my brush in clean water and I'm just dampening the entire piece of paper. And now I'm going to do analogous colors again. So all colors in a row or color neighbors, and so they all work really well together. So I'm dipping in and out of all those colors that I know will go really nicely together. I'm kind of letting them drip and blend on the paper together, and I'm putting them all on, and just the really juicy colors, and dripping some into the top, and just kind of letting everything blend in there together and do its thing. And it's a really fun way to play with the paint. So the next one is dry brush. So dry brush, you want to get a good amount of pigment on your brush, but then get lots of the water off. I almost took a little bit too much of the water off on that first one. And then you drag it on the side across your paper, and it picks up all the texture of the watercolor paper. So if you have some nice cold pressed paper with lumps and bumps and nooks and crannies, you can pick up all that nice texture with the dry brush, and because it's not real liquidy, it will just skip over the top of the bumps and the nooks and the crannies of that paper, and you get the beautiful texture marks, which is just very unique to watercolor paper. So it kind of comes out really cool. Like this one I kind of think looks a little bit like plaid. So here I am adding a third color and a thinner line, and I just thought this one came out really cute. I really liked it. Now, the next one is one of my favorites. It's alcohol, so we need it to be extremely wet, and you probably want to choose a dark color. So I'm going for dark purples and deep blues, and I'm keeping it extremely damp. You want it to be a juicy color, nice and wet. It will work with all colors, so I'm not going to say it won't, but your best results will be with a dark color, dark green, dark blue, deep reds. You'll get the most interesting and result. So you can either use what I'm using as a Q-tip dipped into the alcohol and placed directly on the paper. You can use an eyedropper or a pipette if you'd prefer, and it always comes out stunning like it is here. It's just absolutely beautiful. You can do this for like a starry night in a background or an evening scene in your paintings. It just always comes out so beautiful. It's like one of the most stunning techniques to try. It always comes out great. So the next one is a similar technique, but it comes out much more subtle. And this one is water blooms. So we're going to start the same way with a dark color and very, very wet. But instead of adding alcohol, we're going to add just plain water. And you can do it the same way, either with a Q-tip like I did, or with a pipette or a eyedropper. So I'm going to be using my Q-tip dipped into water, and it's, I dip each time. I'm dipping into fresh, clean water. And this one is extremely subtle, so when you first apply it, you don't really get to see your blooms until they develop. I usually set it aside and let it dry, and then you'll see the beautiful subtle blooms. This next technique is called charging, and so what we do is we lay down wet colors, very wet and damp colors, and then we go into those wet colors with other colors and allow those colors to interact. So we're adding additional colors to each color we lay down. It could just be one color, but here I'm putting a whole bunch down to create an abstract design. But we allow those colors to interact and expand within each other into each other. So it's a wet on wet technique. And it's really interesting, and you can create some really beautiful abstracts with this technique, or just learn a lot about color interactions. It's really interesting and a lot of fun to play with. There really is no limit to how many different colors that you can really apply to this technique. And, you could have a lot of fun just like making multicolor combinations and just seeing how all those colors react with each other and how they change each other. It's a really fun technique and a lot of fun to play with. The next technique is called spritzing, and in spritzing we can just drop in areas of color and allow them to just kind of mix on the page. And even though we've sprayed the page, there's still lots of areas that are still dry, so it won't completely cover the page. There'll still be some dry areas where the colors won't mix and blend. And so it's really nice for backgrounds, and you can kind of get an impressionist kind of feel or in your painting. And it's really nice for like gardens in the distance in your paintings and stuff, so you get some really cool effects with it. So it's really fun to play with. So now we're going to do some oil pastel resist. So I'm using a white oil pastel and a pink one, and I'm going to do just an abstract design on this white piece of paper. And so the oil pastel acts as a resist, just like the regular watercolor resist would act, and it repels the watercolor paint, except you don't have to remove oil pastel. Now the oil pastel, obviously you can't see what I'm drawing with the white until I go over it again with the watercolor wash that I'm going to be putting down. So I mix up just, a nice amount of that wash to go over it with, because I want to make sure I have enough. And the white watercolor will show right up. And also, it does not want to rub off on anything after the wash goes down, which is really nice. So it makes it really versatile. So like if you had like small areas that you wanted just to mask, you could use a white oil pastel, and I have done that in the past. It is a really fun technique. You can do paintings with it, you can do a drawing or a design with it, and it's a really fun technique to use and create really lovely mixed media effects. So now we're going to be using the salt. So we're going to need a very wet wash. So I'm going to go over with a very dark color. Again, when we're using things like salt, alcohol, doing water blooms, we want to have a very, very wet wash. I'm using a bunch of different blues, but it could be all one solid color. It doesn't matter. And then the thing about salt is you can use coarse salt, you can use fine salt, you can use kosher salt. They all come out looking different because of the grain. The fineness of the grain will determine the pattern and the texture you get. So you can see how it almost immediately starts to get to work. And you will not see the final product until this is 100% dry. Salt is wonderful for creating texture, like a frosted window, texture on rocks, things like that. And it always looks really wonderful in a painting. So this is the last one, and what we're going to do here is we're going to do some blotting. Now, artists like Charles Demuth were in the 19th century, who was a very famous watercolorist. He used this technique a lot, and you will see after we start blotting away that it is something you've probably seen in other people's watercolor paintings. So you can use pretty much anything, tissues, paper towels, and I'm going to show you saran wrap or cling film and a textured piece of paper towel to remove it. Here I'm using the plastic wrap, and plastic wrap, if you leave it sitting, and especially if you leave it sitting overnight, it leaves a very specific looking mark. Paper towel, if it's textured, will leave really interesting marks. Tissue looks completely different. So this is a technique you can really experiment with and get some really interesting techniques. Sometimes I really think it looks like tie-dye. This is also one you can really have fun with. So I just want to go over them now that they're all dry and everything. So the first one is wet on dry, and this is that first one that we did, and I thought that one came out super cute. And this is the wet on wet. They look a little different when they've dried, and just really fun. This is the dry brush with the 3 colors. Now, a lot of this yellow kind of picked up some of the blue paint, and it's almost like a lime green now, which I think is really pretty. This was the alcohol on the on that nice background that we did with the purples and the dark blues. It just came out really beautiful. This will be really pretty on whatever colors you put it on, but it's very dramatic on dark colors. So like if you went in with anything dark, dark green, dark reds, blacks, and dark grays, it looks amazing on the darker colors, but it will work on any color because it will always have that effect. It just pushes the pigment away and it just makes this amazing look. Now this is the water blooms, and they're very subtle. Very, very subtle, and they always come out a little different. If your paper is really wet, they come out different than if the paper is damp. If the paper is damp, you'll get more of that kind of effect where it's like almost like that one kind of looks like the moon with an aura, and then here it has like much more subtle kind of spidery looking a spidery looking effect. And you know, they all come out different. It depends on how wet the paper is, but it's a very subtle and really beautiful effect. These are really nice for backgrounds. If you want a moody background and you're doing abstracts, blooms are gorgeous. So blooms were when the paper was really wet with pigment and then we just dropped the water on. So you could drop it on with an eyedropper or your Q-tip. This was the charging, so really wet pigment and then dropping in added colors and just letting them blend. Super fun. And then spritzing, so the paper's not 100% wet, and then we're just dropping in color and then allowing the color to spread. So you can see all the little pieces of light and stuff coming through where the paper was dry and the paint didn't spread. But what I love about it is it almost looks like a wildflower garden. With no effort whatsoever. Like it almost looks like, you know, an abstract garden. It's so pretty. Now here is the salt. Now I did nothing to the salt ahead of time. So what we're going to do right now is I want you to see what we do with it later. So I'm going to take just a paper towel and I'm going to rub the salt off. You just do it very gently. You do it with your finger if you want, and then it comes off. Some of it will remain on the paper. Not all of it wants to come off sometimes, but it leaves a really stunning effect. It leaves these really beautiful places where it pushes the salt back and it leaves a beautiful, beautiful texture. And I just think salt is one of my very favorites. It almost looks like frost or just really beautiful. It's one of my very favorites. I love it on blue best, but everybody's different. I mean, you can use it on any color, but the dark colors again look best with it. The Oil Pastel Resist, which is just, I love this one. It's one of my favorite techniques. You can just get in there with your oil pastel, but the thing that I really think is interesting is that when you do it, the oil pastel really stays put after you paint over it for whatever reason. And this is a super creamy oil pastel because it's the Caran d'Ache oil pastels. So these are super creamy and they're not coming off. Once you paint over them, for whatever reason, they seem to not smudge as much. So you can draw realistically with these and have this happen, or you can just make a really cool abstract design or whatever you want and then put a wash over it and they come out really fun. So I love this technique, and yeah, play around with it because you can get some really cool effects. This is the blotting, which again, I love because it kind of looks like tie-dye or bleach or whatever, but it really all you do is a really wet washy background and then lift up with a variety of things. You can use a tissue paper, but you can even see in here where I use that textured paper towel. It has some really interesting textures. In here where I use the saran, I got some interesting textures. And there are just so many different things that we can use with watercolor to create different effects, that I may do another one in a few weeks and just show you some other things. There's so many things that we can try that I'd love to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel because it helps my channel grow, and I do really appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here, and please come again soon.